chicka bow wow podcast.
All right, so I got a little intro. So, as you know, I have two podcasts, and I was talking to my lawyer friend Alex Berry about coming on the Lawyer Show, and it turns out he's also an artist, and like we got to do 2 episodes in one.
Of course.
And it's just too much for me to handle on my own, so I had to bring in
Legal expert
Andrew. Andrew is available, and he's really cheap.
Yeah, he said he'd buy me lunch.
And he's actually really good. And he's already helped me with a podcast already. So we're going to do it. We're going to do What in the Law podcast and Smokin Poetry podcast, joint episode. And we're going to talk about stuff.
2 for 1.
So let's talk about Alex Berry for a few minutes. It's right in the front, so why don't we give a little teaser, and then we'll talk about your professional life. But what is this art thing here, this game?
That's high treason. So, and then I've also got corrupt bargain. So, you know when we're in the courtroom, Mike, where do you win and lose a case?
Preparation, I would say.
I think it's jury selection.
Well, yeah, like if you're talking about the day of trial.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so I wanted to make a game about jury selection and where that was really important. Because my hobby is board gaming, and there was no board game where jury selection mattered so much. You know, because there's cases I won where I had no business winning. Because I had a great jury, but I've lost cases I shouldn't have lost because I had a terrible jury. It's, who's in the jury pool that day, how well do you read the jury and get that right jury?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make a game about that. So that's what this high treason is about. And just for gameplay purposes, for, having the jury be such a central factor, I wanted to pick a trial that just had 6 jurors as opposed to 12, just for gameplay management purposes.
As much as I love this view where we can only see your head levitating above the game.
It's all you need to be a lawyer is your brain.
Yeah.
But let's let them see that that there is more to you than your brain.
Yeah. And so that's why I picked this specific trial of Louis Riel. It's the only capital case in history that I'm familiar with where the defendant got only 6 jurors. And that was one of his appeals. You can't hang me. You can't, send me to death with just 6 jurors. That's not legal. Unfortunately, that appeal was not successful.
It's also not legal that we got half your head on the camera. So let's rotate a little bit. We can do it natural. I'll tilt this here.
What?
You got half your head.
Oh, we don't need to see it. Look, I look like a trash bag. You guys.
It's okay because you did trim up for us actually. You hadn't been working for a couple days, but you're helping us out here, so I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I just came from physical therapy.
Therapy? Really?
Therapy.
Oh.
Yeah. No, I dislocated my shoulder and whatnot. When the thing happened.
So you're really a warrior coming straight from there to help the podcast out.
Whatever.
I mean,
I'm a real warrior to sit in a chair and talk about stuff for trying to go back to work where I walk for 12 hours a day. Oh, you're so brave for sitting in a room.
With 2 lawyers, dude.
Well,
so that is a little different than regular people.
I've sat in rooms with 2 cops before. This is... You guys don't have guns on your person. So
that you know of.
That I know of.
That you know of. Actually, I don't. No, I don't. I know my limitations, and I'm clumsy, so I don't do that. As I joke, I would more likely to shoot myself in the foot than the bad guy, and I know that. But you're not packing?
No.
Okay.
No.
Maybe. I don't know if we want this in the show or not.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to keep the mystery out there. We got way off track. We were talking about the game, but why don't we talk about what qualifies you? What you were talking about, this lawyer thing.
Yeah.
For people who don't know who you are, what is this lawyer gig you're doing?
It's similar to what you do. Like I do criminal defense. Try and help people. Same motivations that motivate you. Is we've got the power of the state, pressing down on people. A lot of people unfairly charged, and we do what we can, try and help people in those situations.
All right. Why don't we talk about give a little bit of your history? What was your kind of career arc to doing what you're doing now?
It's graduated from college, wasn't sure what I was going to do. Went to Korea for a year, taught English over there. It's like, may as well
really? Well,
may as well take the LSAT and see how I do. So,
did you study?
Like 2 or 3 days
really
before the LSAT. Yeah.
That's like the media representation of the LSAT is nobody passes it the first time, and it's really hard. It's like, I don't know, I've always been a pretty good test taker. I probably flunked the LSAT because I don't have a context for it, but like, I've never taken a test I couldn't study for 4 hours and get a B on.
Yeah.
So I'm always fascinated by that. Yeah, the LSAT is like the worst test you can ever take. But wait, did you find it easy?
Yeah, it's a whole lot easier than the bar exam.
Oh. Yeah, that's a nightmare.
Okay, well, I feel like that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Maybe. But as after school, or after a career, well, actually, let me talk about Korea. What's that like? Well,
that was really interesting. I would go and I would teach English at effectively a private school to these kids. So they would go to their normal public school during the day, and then I would teach them from like 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night. And then I was instructed to give them like an hour of homework every day. Who knows how much they were getting from their public school? Like these poor kids, like they didn't have time to be a kid. They're just working the whole time. But it was a great cultural experience, but very isolating because you're there. You don't really. You're working these strange hours, right? So like I get out, I'm done work around midnight. It's just a very different experience. I'm glad I did it, but it's not something you want to do lifelong.
What city were you in?
I was in one of the suburbs of Seoul.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So all of was the goal of most of the kids learning English? Were their parents hoping they'd immigrate to the U.S. or were they looking to work like jobs and stuff?
Yeah, I think most were just going to be staying in Korea, but to get ahead, to get a better job.
Knowing English helps a lot.
Yeah.
I grew up in Ecuador, in South America, and learning English is kind of just like something if you want to get ahead anywhere in the world, it's helpful to know. But most people in the rest of the world learn another language anyway.
Yeah.
They'll Korean kids might learn English and Chinese.
Yeah.
And they grow up knowing Korean, but most Ecuadorians know more English than Americans know Spanish by 100%. And
probably higher than 100%.
Probably by 150 to 100%, frankly.
We're not here for statistics.
Right.
We got enough other subjects we're covering.
Yes.
But what were you plugged into the international community there at all, or was it just you? Just kind of teaching Korean kids?
Well, there were other. Party foul there.
What?
Well, there's going to be contempt of court from the judge. There's no contempt of court on the podcast.
So there
professional podcaster, everybody, the one who does this all the time.
So there would be other people.
His head's coming off
also teaching English there. So other people from Canada, the States, Britain, whatever, they would all be teaching because I guess the parents were sold on, hey, have a native English speaker teach your kid English. So
it helps. They're mainly doing it online now.
Yeah.
I know people who teach English to Koreans specifically, actually, that mainly do it online.
Yeah.
But I imagine those programs are still going for like wealthier families, probably.
Yeah. I don't know. It's been more than a decade since I've been in that scene.
Where in Canada are you from?
I'm from Vancouver area.
I spent a year in British Columbia, but on one of the tiny little islands.
Yeah.
So, I was on Thetis Island. It was really cool.
Okay. Yeah.
So how did you transfer from this multinational guy to a Colorado Springs lawyer? And
Where no one ever leaves.
yeah.
Well, so I was, in law school during the recession, and no one's hiring. Only person hiring is effectively the government. And the Colorado state public defender system is probably one of the best in the country, right? Because it's a statewide system. A lot of these other public defenders, it's done by like the county you're living in. It's just that specific county. So because it's funded by the state, and then it's your state tax dollars fund it, as opposed to county property taxes or sales taxes, whatnot. They're better funded, and they're hiring people all the time. So it's like, do I want to be unemployed out of law school, or do I want to have a job? So I got a job with the public defender system, did that for a bit before starting my own practice.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So around how long have you been in private practice, roughly?
So I started my own practice in 2012.
Okay.
And I was at the PDs before then.
And how long were you at the PD?
Just a year. And then I'm just like, my wife had a kid. We had a kid. She was staying at home with the kid. They were not being paid very well at that time. So I had to start my own practice because the PD salary, I was thankful for what I had, but it just wasn't enough for a growing family.
Anything you would say to people in law school or people thinking about going to be a lawyer, about the public defender's office, about not necessarily the specific office, but just in general, that type of work, and what that experience was like?
If you think it's something you want to do, make sure you go shadow a lot of people and see for yourself what it's going to be like. Obviously, like whatever you read in a book or see in a movie, that's not going to be what it's really like. So you want to see what it's really like, and somebody describing it is not going to be sufficient. You've got to go shadow multiple people, see for yourself what it's like, and then decide, is that something you really want to put your career into?
It's pretty intense over there. I mean, what kind of caseload is it like at the public defender's office? I know it depends on misdemeanors versus felonies and things like that, but what's that like?
I mean, I remember sometimes I'd get almost 400 cases. I mean, it was just crazy. Of course, this was before body camera. I don't think you could do it now with body camera, because just you wouldn't have enough time to watch the body camera on all these cases. So if you notice now, they usually have 2 public defenders in each county division, as opposed to just 1.
Yeah. I want to scream every time I see there's 2 DAs and 2 public defenders in a courtroom at a time when I go to misdemeanor court, because I didn't have that experience very often.
I apologize if this is a little hot button. We not use it, but I just have a couple body cam questions, like from a lawyer's perspective. You said it makes the job longer. Do you think it makes the job easier or harder?
Yeah, it's so much better because it will show police misconduct, right? So before, whatever the officer writes in the report, that's gospel to a jury, right? They're like, well, he wrote it at the time. He doesn't have a reason to lie. That's what a juror thinks sometimes. That's what the DA is going to say. So body camera will expose police misconduct, or sometimes, I've got a client who misremembers. They're like, I hadn't been drinking. None of this happened. Here's the body camera. You're clearly slurring your speech. You're stumbling all over. We need to work out a plea deal.
Right.
So it's a win-win all around.
During again, a layman. Apologies. But so you would get that during discovery before the trial.
Yes.
Is that before you make a plea?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got all the. It's like, we're not saying you were sober when you're wearing a cone on your head or whatever.
Right. I mean, it's certainly changed DUIs, I think. And I remember years ago, I started a little before you, it was sporadic. Sometimes there were cameras, usually the dash cameras, more than the body cameras, and it was more sporadic.
Unless you're in Russia, where like every car
Yeah.
has them.
So I think the state patrol had the dash cameras,
Yes.
but it was like the city police or the sheriff's office often wouldn't.
Right.
Back in the day.
And actually, sometimes the smaller towns would have more of the cameras than the bigger towns sometimes.
Yeah.
And but I have noticed that sometimes if your client, is guilty, you need to plea.
Yeah.
And it's more fair for sure, I would
Yeah.
say. But we also have to spend a lot more time because before it would take a lot. It's a lot quicker to read the 30-page report than to watch the 5 hours of camera.
You know what? I
had
Yeah.
never crossed my mind. Like honestly, I was like, oh great, cameras. Like I don't love cameras everywhere all the time for reasons, but I do like the idea that cops are held accountable with cameras at all times. It never occurred to me that would be an inconvenience for everyone else involved in the case. It probably should have.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really an inconvenience because again,
It makes a lot of things easier, but it makes one thing harder.
it's just more time consuming.
Right. I mean, it's definitely better.
Yeah.
And sometimes I almost would rather just skip reading the reports practically and say, just show me the video.
Yeah.
I do read the reports, but but the video is the most important thing in like a DUI case.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's after the fact, and those interviews, so the body camera won't decide guilty or not guilty, but a DUI case,
Yeah.
What else? We got a little. What else were we going to talk about?
I mean, do you have a specific piece of legal, like I know people got to pay for legal advice, but is there one thing you wish every citizen knew? What's the dumb mistake everybody makes?
Talking to the cops. Do not talk to the police. They are not your friend. This is not like on TV. This is not. What's the show that had the Matlock guy in it? Right.
Matlock.
No, but the actor before, right?
Was that Perry
the black
Mason?
and white? No, not Perry Mason. The black and white show where he was the cop.
Dragnet?
No, and the kid is now a famous director, the redheaded guy.
It's Andy Griffith.
Andy Griffith.
Yeah, it's not Andy Griffith.
Right, it's not Andy Griffith. Right? People
Yeah.
think it's Andy Griffith. They think the cop is Andy Griffith.
I wish every cop was done nuts.
Yeah.
That would make me so happy.
And
to see cops.
That's not the situation, and they unfortunately often view. So here's the thing: when you're a hammer, everything you say is a nail, and the officer's job is to stop crime and catch criminals. So they sometimes see criminals where they do not exist.
I'll do it later.
I will say, I'm not a legal expert. I did work with a lot of retired cops as a school security guy for a couple of years, and boy, did those guys not understand the children in the slightest, because every single kid was up to something. And it's like, no, they're just kids. It's not nefarious. They're being stupid because they're 13, not because they're a criminal in training.
Yeah.
Like it turns out being loud in the cafeteria isn't what's gonna turn somebody into a career criminal. It's poverty and other factors like that. But it was very strange to see what police officers decided was important versus or former police officers saw as important versus what admin saw as important versus what, say, the counselors and people who understood psychology saw as important. It was like a three-way conflict. I'm glad I don't do it anymore, frankly. It was a stressful job, mainly because nobody was making sense.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about the current practice a little bit? I mean, you're basically doing what? Solo practice basically right now? Why don't we tell people about that and how to find you and what you're doing for people who might need help?
Yeah, well, have bar card, will travel. So, taking cases kind of along the Front Range, southern Colorado, western of the mountains, eastern of the plains. someone's charged with a crime. I do a lot of DUI work specifically. So, the field sobriety test that the officers are trained in, A-RIDE, the drug recognition, I've done those same trainings. So that's really my focus, is just on DUIs. I do other cases too, just like you do, Mike, but that's my main focus.
Anything fun or entertaining stories we can think of? Any silly drunk people stories or?
I don't want to spoil any client confidences.
Well, not that, but I don't know. Maybe you saw a lawyer do something horrible.
Any stories you heard from a guy at a bar about a client they had after the statute of limitations?
That was public anyway in trial.
Yeah. So it's surprising to me how many people, when asked by the cops how much have you had to drink, will reply, "Not enough." Or something similar to that effect.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So that's why you don't talk to the cops.
Especially when you're drunk. Or anything else.
That's great.
So where did this artistic life come from?
So I've always been into board games, like ever since I was a kid. Have you ever heard of the game Axis and Allies?
Yes.
Okay, so I was playing that.
That's hardcore.
Yeah, I was playing that when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
And so
Hardcore board games.
It's always been. That's the gateway game. It's the gateway game.
For listeners, Axis and Allies is like Catan, but worse. It's like Risk and Catan at the same time, sort of. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, because there's an economic factor.
Yeah,
and then it's you're attacking Risk. So. Do you mind? Open it up. That's what it's here for. So I really love these cards because they're a lot bigger than standard playing cards. So you can get on the stuff. So you've got the gameplay. So this is just how you play it.
Okay.
So so let's say you've read the rules. You're starting to play it. You can follow along with these. Okay, we finished round 3. We'll flip over the card. What do I do? And then these are the actual cards that you kind of play the game with. And they'll have the gameplay effect, and then they'll have the historical text. So this is a real witness at the trial. So what I did was I pulled the trial transcript, for the entire trial, went through all that to develop, okay, these are the witnesses, these are the lawyers, and try and just build a fun game that still adheres to the history of the trial.
So... For anyone listening, this is a 2-player game.
Yes.
Now, are you playing prosecutor and defender?
Correct. So one person is playing the prosecution team, one person is playing the defense team.
Okay.
So, and there's even an affirmative defense here.
and to remind, I know we said it at the beginning, but this is a trial or we said it before the cameras were on. So do you want to tell a little bit about the story of this?
This is the trial of Louis Riel, who... maybe to a lot of people they've never heard of. If you're from Canada, you probably have heard that name. So he kind of advocated for Métis rights in Canada. And so he was kind of half European, half Native American, and that's who the Métis were. A very quick 5-second version that I'm not doing justice to. Right. But there were a lot of injustices against them, and he had led an initial kind of uprising against the government, got some rights for them in Manitoba, and then had to flee down to the States, was down in the States, and then in another province, they were also being kind of mistreated, and then he was called back to lead them, ended up leading a rebellion, and was caught and put on trial for treason. And the reason I specifically chose to make that the game here is you've got the jurors, and each juror has different aspects. Are they Catholic? Are they Protestant? Are they French speaking? Are they English speaking? What type of employment do they have? Are they employed by the government? Or are they employed, as a farmer? And each juror will have that aspect. And so that's a very key part of the game. And so I wanted to not have it be too burdensome to the player with having 12 jurors, like a typical trial. We just have 6 jurors because that's what actually happened in this trial in history. So,
How long did it take you to make this?
I mean, it took a while. Like I said, I went through the entire trial transcripts. You got to prototype it. You got to refine it. I mean, it took years.
Do you have collaborators or artists you want to shout out?
So, I mean, the artist on this, Tim Allen, he's a great artist.
What if it was that Tim Allen?
It's not that
would
Tim
be
Allen.
great.
It's a different Tim Allen.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he's fantastic.
Here's his. You can see what he looks like here.
So that's Alan Emmerich. That's the
different
guy who
Alan.
helped develop the game, and he was the owner of the company Victory Point Games at the time. I think it's a new ownership, but they're still great. The new ownership is still great. They've just actually released the 3rd edition. So they got some new art for the 3rd edition, and that just came out. So if you want to find it, it's available. This had been out of print for a year or two.
Well, where can you find it?
I mean, I'm sure you can ask your local game shop to get it in, or you can get it online. If you just search Victory Point Games, you can get it there.
Okay. It's not on Amazon.
It may soon be on Amazon. It was on Amazon. I'm sure it'll go back to Amazon. This one's on Amazon.
Okay. Well,
And guys, if you can, shop local. If you can't,
So
cool, but yeah.
I always like to go
good
to local. So in the community, the term is FLGS, Friendly Local Game Store.
Yeah.
That's where I always try and buy stuff. And they will usually work with you. If you want a game and it's not in there, go up, talk to them. They should be able to bring it in.
They're like comic book stores. They like ordering. They're people who have a vested interest in the games themselves. Most people who own game shops like playing games. So if there's a new game that's cool, they want to know about it.
Yeah. So in town, in Colorado Springs, there's a bunch. The 2 I frequent the most are Petrie's and Vans.
Okay.
So Petrie's is kind of just up north on Union, just north of Woodman, and Vans is on Academy. They'll both have gotten stuff in for me, and they're great.
Yeah. And also, if you like games and you're new in an area, like these game stores have events. They're great places to find a new D&D group, or just do a pickup board game with people. If you're looking to meet new people, it's these are great places to hang out.
And
as a socially awkward person.
Yes.
Well, and you can just walk in and you'll get accepted right away. So I just went to Atlanta earlier in the year for a legal training. I looked up the local game stores there. I saw they had a game night. So I finished the training in the day, just showed up at night. You're welcome with open arms. People are happy and friendly to teach you a game.
And obviously kid-friendly.
Yes.
So that's a nice thing, too. Speaking of that, we have another game, Corrupt Bargain. All right, I'll survive.
Yeah.
Speaking of surviving, we got Corrupt Bargain. What is this game?
So that is on the presidential election of 1824. And a lot of people are like, why is that one important?
Yeah.
Well,
why is that one important?
Well, it's the only presidential election since the passing of the 12th Amendment that the House of Representatives picked who the president was. So what happened was, and the reason for the name of the game, under the Constitution, only the top 3 vote getters of Electoral College votes are eligible to win in the presidency. So if there's 10 candidates that all get Electoral College votes, the House of Representatives can only pick from the top 3. And that was kind of Henry Clay's problem. So he was, a master politician, glad handling everybody, controlled kind of the House of Representatives, but he was not the top 3 vote getters, one of the top 3. So it's John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. Everyone knows their names. There was also William Crawford, who got some more Electoral College votes. He'd previously been Secretary of the Treasury. And Clay falls short. He's the 4th.
Was he under Jackson?
No.
Or not under Jefferson, I mean?
No. So it was previous, I think it was under Monroe or Madison.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly, so I don't want to misspeak. But he... so Henry Clay is the fourth place person, but he still basically swung enough votes in the House of Representatives over to John Quincy Adams. Ultimately, John Quincy Adams made Henry Clay the Secretary of State, who at that time, that was seen as the stepping stone. So now we think kind of the vice presidency is the stepping stone to the presidency. Back then, it was seen as the Secretary of State. So Jackson denounced it as this corrupt bargain, hence the name. And so what you do in this game is you're trying to get enough electoral college votes that you can be picked for president when it goes to the House of Representatives, and then have those votes in the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a dual factor that you need to play on.
So how does the game work?
So the game works is you've got these event cards here, so like this, and there's a track. So you'll have this, they will be arranged along the board here. And depending where you draft the card from, you're going to get different amounts of action points. So you're going to have cards splayed all the way along here. They're going to give you an event on the text that you do, plus where are you drafting it. And then when it, let's say this one gets drafted out, everything else slides down, and a new card will come out. So the longer cards are not picked, they kind of become more valuable. But you also have suits. So there's, tariffs, slavery, Western expansion. These are kind of the issues of the time. And so every time you get 3 cards from the same suit, you can then lock down a state, and no one can put more support into it or not. So there's a bunch of balancing factors.
Does anybody just get a state because of who they were?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So I mean.
Yeah. Anybody could. So we're balancing the rules there versus
yes.
like reality.
Right.
Yeah,
so I
okay.
mean.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
Yeah, I dig it.
I'm just. Well, I wish I had kids right now, because this would be a really fun thing.
Do you think a game like this would raise or lower somebody's faith in the American electoral system?
I mean, it will show them what the Constitution says and what you need to abide by. Mm-hmm. And I hope we continue to abide by the Constitution.
It's better than nothing, for sure.
Right. Yeah. What else? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say what a fascinating I don't really know Henry Clay or William H. Crawford, but like Jackson and Adams are two very interesting characters in early American history, just from the fact that John Quincy Adams is like the first American royal. He becomes president because his dad was president. Whether that's true or not, that was kind of that's the perception. And then Jackson was this wild card patriot who fought and bled and killed a lot of people so this country could exist, and then killed a lot of people so white people could have after the country became a place. Maybe we should on the game.
As you're doing again.
And I know
Really
it's like,
out.
right, this is the one kids can play. Sorry, guys.
I've learned how to do this part of editing now. Well, it's taken me a long time to learn this stuff.
It takes a while.
I'm still getting there, but I think I know how to silence things. But I mean, it's just such a unique kind of thing. How did you get into designing board games?
I've played a lot. I used to have a YouTube channel, kind of like you do, where I reviewed board games, and then I just didn't have enough time to put into it. With wife, kids, law practice, but I could find a couple hours here and there to chip away and work on a design, especially Friday afternoons. I'm sure you're familiar with clients no-show pretty often on a Friday afternoon. I do not want to set an appointment on a Friday afternoon unless somebody really insists tells me they're coming. And even then, 50-50, they're going to no-show.
That's better than my
I
odds.
miss a lot of Friday afternoon plans. I'm not.
So that's usually when I'm actually working on the design, is Friday afternoon, when somebody shows or no-shows. And I've got some free time. It's the end of the week. My mind's kind of done with the legal work. Let's tinker around with a game design.
Do you find it... I work on a lot of different things because I have ADD and I'll lose the thread on something and be like, oh, I'm not hyper-focused on that anymore. What can I work on that would be helpful and keep me sane? Do you find like this is like working on the rules and stuff is like a decompression from the stresses of like legal life?
Yeah. I mean, it's you're doing something different, right? Some people love cooking, music, poetry. I like board games and board game design.
What's your favorite board game? You can say your own, but what's your other favorite?
That is a complicated question because it depends. How many players are there going to be? Okay. How much time do I have?
Yeah.
So they run the gamut, right? We could be talking.
I'm sorry. Did you ask me what my favorite comedian was?
Well, give us like one or two that you would just throw out there off the top of your head.
So it may sound weird, but I really like this game called Successors.
Okay.
Where it's Alexander the Great is dead, and you're playing his various generals vying for power. And what makes it unique is there's kind of dual win conditions. You can win by just getting enough land that you're seen as like that, de facto successor. But you can kind of become the de jure successor by taking Alexander's body back from Babylon and burying him in Macedonia. Now you're trying to move your army in your funeral cart back there. You're going to get intercepted. There's going to be a lot of battles. It's a pretty risky proposition.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and one thing I was just thinking of these games. One thing that I think that's really neat about them is you're learning about some of the secondary characters, so to speak, or not like the main names. Because I noticed this in history and in life in general is the person or the face you see is not all there is.
Yeah.
And there's usually not even the most important thing, frankly.
Right.
I mean, there's all these other parties. Henry Clay had as much to do with that election as anyone, right?
Yeah.
And not to say he wasn't a big name. He's still a big name, but he wasn't as famous as Andrew Jackson.
Well, there was the Hitler's friend's girlfriend who kept him from committing suicide after the beer hall push.
Yeah.
Like that. World War II might not have happened. Hitler might have killed himself in like 1929 or something. I have the year wrong, but like prior to his run, when he was on house arrest writing Mein Kampf, he almost killed himself. And one lady said, "Don't do it. You're great," and he didn't. And then, so what I'm saying is sometimes.
Yeah, but also those I noticed the same thing in history and in life. There's always someone who you don't know.
Right.
I mean, who the person who's giving the brilliant speech did not necessarily write that speech. And I think who wrote the president's speech today and who wrote Alexander the Great speech when he gave some big rousing thing.
Right.
Probably someone we never heard of. And I get help too. We all have people help us.
I was going to ask, do you guys do your own writing for court, or do you have a team for that?
No, I mean you've got to have the legal analysis.
Well, no,
to write the briefs and stuff.
Yeah,
that's not something you want to pass off.
Well, I guess what I mean is, do you have, are you doing that by yourself, or is that something you have people helping you with polish and stuff on?
Like
I'm
trial
not looking
preparation.
for a job. I'm just asking.
It depends.
Yeah.
Frankly, if it's a speeding case and I'm probably not going to bring in a panel of experts to get ready for that hearing.
Yeah.
But if it's a massive felony or a significant, thing, you might bring in a panel of people. At least I've done that, and to say, okay, what do you think about this argument versus that argument? So it depends is my answer.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, you want to test that. I mean, we even just choose ideas off each other sometimes.
Yeah. And that is one actually extra, frankly, free service a lot of people get that they don't know about. If I'm getting ready for a trial, just by nature, I'm probably going to say, hey, Alex, what do you think about this or that?
Right.
And I don't give you an extra bill for that, and you're not going to bill me for that, are you?
No.
I mean,
all right, thank you.
Yeah. Well, that is the joke with, like, because that happens in most industries, but with lawyers, the joke is you ask somebody a question at a party, you get billed on Monday. You know, that's kind of whether I know it happens, I know it doesn't always happen, but like I also know that there's like a liability issue. That's why lawyers do it sometimes, so they don't get in trouble if it was bad advice.
I think it's more just a corporate big law mentality
versus
a solo practice.
And I think there's a difference between during, the afternoon and seeing another lawyer and saying, hey, you got time to talk. One thing I noticed that can be very difficult with my dual life is I'll be out at one of these open mics or something, and someone will say, hey, I got some legal questions.
Right, and you're like, nope. No.
I don't. It's not simple, and if it is, you can still call me in the morning and ask me that simple question in the morning.
Yeah. Sorry, drunk bongo player. I'm not going to give you legal advice you don't understand at 1 a.m. It's a bad precedent.
It's not always that extreme,
but like that.
But that's it can be difficult, and I don't know how you feel, but you're not doing the 400 cases like you did with the public defender at once, but we have a number of cases, and jumping from one to another it can take a minute to process.
Yeah.
Did you have like a system for dealing with that many cases? Well, I mean, I know you had a system, but like, did you have something really specific you would do? Yeah.
It was really just triage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sad, because people at the public defenders are just not getting the best legal representation because they don't have time to give it to you.
Right. I mean, I think that's something most citizens understand.
Yeah.
It's not something they think about because it's sad, but I think most people have seen a movie and know, hey, public defenders work really hard and they don't have the support they need to pull out a win every time.
They're overworked and underpaid, sadly.
And I don't know about your experience, but from what I can tell, these people are doing their best.
Absolutely.
They are not just there for the money, for sure.
That is definitely.
And they're not just saying this is an easy job. They're and it's a
tough, difficult job.
And I do notice some not different than other lawyers can be hard at communicating.
Yeah.
Because I get a lot of this when people hire me who had a public defender before. Sometimes the problem is the communication, but they got 400 cases.
Right.
So what you gonna do? They're doing their best.
Keeping them straight. I can't imagine. I mean, Well, you said you joined up in what 08, 09 because that was because of the crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I graduated in the tail end of the recession.
Yeah, I
down here and what works.
Yeah. I joined the Army in 08 for similar reason because it was.
What I do know is to have your face in here when you're talking at the very minimum. Yeah.
Nobody wants to see it.
It's all
in the back of my head so much that it's. No, but I mean, I think a lot of people went into public service at that point because kind of like in the 30s, the government was the only person hiring at the time, and. I wanted to be a writer. The Army told me I could be a writer. You wanted to be a lawyer. The government told you got to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
It's kind of. How that happens. Public service.
Yes. So speaking of public service, or private service, I want to get a little plug for your book here.
Oh, because that is very much a private service.
Well, let's do a private service.
Yeah.
Let's hold that one up.
It's probably a little cheaper than the board games, but I wrote a book. If you listen to this podcast, you may have heard me talk about it before. It's called Midnight Thoughts. It's a short story collection. It's got 16 short stories in it. It's about 151 pages, and I'm really proud of it. The first story will make you cry. The last story will make you cry. and some of the stories in the middle will probably just piss you off. But it's a pretty good book.
It's a brilliant book. I love it.
It's very nice.
And everyone I've been talking to who reads it loves it. As we were talking about, our friend Ferret loved it so much that he put it in a video game he designed.
I think he mainly did that because I asked, because he needed content. But
it was our friend made a video game.
Our friend made
and we talked about that in a prior Smokin Poetry podcast episode, and that's how good the book is.
Check out Ferret Fantasy and look up Ferret.
Faerret
on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, and check out his work. He's a brilliant musician. He made a video game because he wrote a video game soundtrack and said, "I have to make the game now."
There you go.
So,
the stories of the book are
and a couple of the stories from the book are hiding in the text of this JRPG my roommate made.
So, anything else? This is your chance to grill lawyers on camera. Any other
should I
sue? Stuff that we can have out to the public.
Yeah. So let's no.
Now I got to edit that, don't
No,
I?
I'm kidding. Why? What the? This hasn't happened.
You're just giving more editing challenges.
There you go.
It
That's
hasn't happened ever, and it's happened twice in this
court. It's like a courtroom here, and it's going off, and you can't stop it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll still give you the chance to get to grill the lawyers with any burning questions.
See. Okay. What's the legal limit in Colorado for alcohol and marijuana? Is there?
Should we refer them to my prior episode and just say click on that?
Yeah. I haven't listened. I'm going to be honest. I haven't listened to the legal episodes. So, I'm just thinking. Wait, I'm so much better at art questions than legal questions. I'm just going to ask how to get away with crimes. Graffiti. What do I got to be worried about there? And what happens if I tell people how to make Molotov cocktails on a podcast? Am I going to get in trouble for that?
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Okay. No.
Simple.
Simple. Actually, this is an honest legal question pertaining to that. As I wanted to do this as a joke, and I do think it's very funny, but I'm going to record another comedy album in the next few months. I wanted one of those tracks to be testing the content filters on Spotify and Apple Music by just reading how to make a Molotov cocktail and seeing if they take it down or not. What you're saying is that's against the law, or is it just unadvisable?
Probably against the law.
Probably against the law?
I don't know.
Well, that's good.
Don't do it.
It's not worth any risk.
Disappointing.
The laughs are not worth what you're going to deal with. So don't break the laws. Our legal advice for the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. Anything else you want to say in closing arguments?
No.
All right.
Where
all the places to find you. We've talked about the games.
Yeah.
Where to find them. And if someone is just far away and they can't get to a local store, we really want people to go to local stores. But this one is on Amazon, The Corrupt Bargain.
Correct.
Okay. And as is Midnight Thoughts.
Yeah.
As is Midnight.
And what about you as a lawyer? What's your website and all that stuff?
It's droadlaw.com and licensed here in Colorado, just like you, Mike.
In every county.
Every county.
All right. I ripped that off somewhere I saw. I don't know. Anyways, we'll stop the thing first. Now you're giving me editing challenges.
No, just leave that part and end it there.
I might leave that and just take out the name so people wonder what we're talking about, the mysteries. And that way you'll have to come hang out with us and see us to know what we just cut out.
That's right.
And we were talking about. So thank you so much to Alex Berry and to Andrew Ingram for helping out, and for the first ever joint episode of What in the Law podcast and Smokin Poetry podcast. It's just smoking hot, doesn't mean nothing.
Buy my book and follow me on Instagram at Andrew Ingram 88. My birth year.
We can close with that.
Yeah.